back, fight fans. We are doing another installment of Where Are They Now, and this time we're in Macau, China, with none other than former IBF Jr lightweight champ Barry Michael. Barry, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Bob. Pleasure. Certainly a pleasure, mate.
You're here at the IBF convention in Macau. How have you been finding it so far?
It's an incredible place. You couldn't pick a better venue because Macau is really something to see. You know, with all the casinos and this Wynn Palace Casino here. I mean, I've stayed in Vegas quite a few times, and you know, as we know, the Wynn casinos are fabulous, but this is one out of the box for sure. It's an absolute ripper.
Yeah, definitely. I've heard nothing but really positive comments from everybody. Well, Barry, I'm really excited to be able to talk to you because we've been doing this series now for a little bit, and talking with champs from yesteryear and maybe guys that fight fans have wondered, what's going on with him now? And I remember him; he was an exciting fighter, and so on and so forth. So it was a great surprise to see you here, and I'm really looking forward to it. So you were born actually in England, not Australia.
Yeah, June the 2nd, 1955. I was born in Watford, the United Kingdom, but migrated when I was with my parents, obviously when I was 2, and I was nationalised an Australian by the time I was about 5. When I went back to the United Kingdom to fight, it was like champ comes home, and I said, "Hang on, I'm an Aussie." But look, I'm very proud of my British heritage, but I'm an Aussie.
Yeah. So how did that go over?
Yeah, no, they copped it fairly well. I mean, they had no choice, to be honest. But it was champ comes home, on front page of British Boxing News.
And now, so you were born Barry Michael Swettenham, and I don't know if many people know that. Now, did I pronounce the last name correctly?
Swettenham, yes. Same as the Swettenham stud, and the Swettenham, there's the Port Swettenham in, I think it's Malaysia. And there's actually a coat of arms to the family, Swettenham, Swettenham. I dropped it back in the old days when I started fighting on TV ringside because I didn't think Merv Williams, who was one of the commentators, would have got his mouth around Barry Swettenham. So I made it, Michael's my middle name. And about 6 years ago, I changed it by deed poll because everyone knows me as Barry Michael. But
okay.
So that really is my surname, Swettenham, and I'm incredibly proud of it.
Oh, good. So it wasn't a marketing ploy that Michael would sound better and world champion Swettenham, but it was it's just for the ease of the TV commentator.
Exactly. Well, he was a legend, Merv Williams, and Ron Casey. They used to work together on TV ringside, which is where I started my professional career. I won my first 7 fights, and I won the best first year boxer. And it was like a religion to watch TV ringside. It used to be on a Monday night. Back in those days, people still talk about TV ringside.
Yeah, I've seen old clips. I actually have some in my collection of some of the old TV ringside clips.
Well, I've actually just registered a business name called International TV Ringside, which I'm going to start promoting here in probably the end of September. It looks like it's going to be in Beijing. It looks pretty sure that I'm going to get Timmy Zhu, the son of Kostya Zhu, as the main event against a top Chinese opponent probably for an IBF regional championship.
Great, that sounds good. So you started off your career. First of all, did you have an amateur career, or how did you get interested in boxing?
Yeah, no, I basically was brought up in the commission flats. My parents, as I said, were migrants and didn't have a lot of money. And we lived in commission flats until I was about probably 10 or 11 before my parents got, my dad went back to school and got a degree and ended up going up very high in the public service. Finally bought a little house in Williamstown, which in the old days was, I think they paid $7,000 for it, probably about 1967. Now it'd be like 1.3 million. The suburb now, the average price is about 1.6, so it's certainly changed over the decades. That was before the Westgate Bridge was built into Melbourne, or from the west of Melbourne to the city, and that changed things. And back in those days, Williamstown was a poor suburb, and now it's an extremely affluent suburb, and it's right on the water. It's a peninsula. I still live in Williamstown, and I'm about 200 metres from what's called the Strand, which has got magnificent views of the city. So it is a great spot.
Oh, excellent.
But I had 17 amateur fights. I was no great shakes as an amateur. I won my first 5 against guys of similar experience, and then people wouldn't fight me, so I started fighting guys that had 70 or 80 fights, and I lost 5 amateur fights in a row. I reckon 4 of them were bad decisions, and then I went to another trainer and I had 7 more for 5 wins, sorry. So I had 10 wins, 7 losses as an amateur, so I was no great shakes as an amateur, but it was my goal and dream to actually fight on TV ringside, and to one day, Lionel Rose was my idol, the great Lionel Rose, and by the time I was 19, I became one of his main sparring partners, and it was my goal and dream from once I started fighting on ringside to one day step in the ring and hear the man saying 15 3-minute rounds for the championship of the world. And that was my goal and dream, to at least fight for a world title. And eventually, as you know, I got the opportunity and I won it and had it for a couple of years, but I never looked beyond actual fighting for the title.
Yeah. Now, I'd have to say, looking at your record, you definitely came up tough, and you didn't have the shortcut like a lot of fighters do today. You had a long road, 55 fights before you got a chance to fight for the world title.
Exactly. I fought all over the world. I fought in Indonesia 5 times. I fought in South America, in Georgetown, Guyana.
Yes.
I fought in Hawaii a couple of times, Wales, the United Kingdom. So yeah, I travelled. I always have gloves, we'll travel, and I'd fight anywhere, basically go anywhere for very small money, because boxing was, after TV Ringside died, which it did, there was a couple of serious injuries and a couple of deaths way back then, and TV Ringside was taken off TV, so I went from going to fight on TV Ringside for pretty good money to fighting in small halls, 10 3-minute rounds for like $250, and when I won the Australian title over 15 rounds in 1978 in Coonabarabran, where the champion lived, I went and fought him in his hometown for 15 3-minute rounds. I got $750 Australian dollars.
Wow.
And it went 15. He was a brilliant boxer, but I won clearly, and I held that championship for 9 years, that Australian lightweight title. So yeah, Bob, I did it the hard way.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you are definitely a throwback because you come from the 15-round era.
Yeah.
You know, some of the few fighters that are still around today that they can say they fought the 15-round era. Now, you had some scheduled 15-rounders, and you actually did go 15 rounds on a few occasions.
I think 4 that went 15, and 1 I knocked a guy out in the 15. Jimmy Brown, he beat me in the amateurs. I lost to him in my I think it was actually my last amateur fight before I turned professional. I wasn't 18, so you had to be 18. He turned professional before me. By the time I fought him, they were calling, he was a southpaw. They were calling him the next Jimmy Carruthers, very good boxer. And I fought him I fought a few 3-rounders, and then 1 4-rounder, and then I fought him in a 6-rounder. And I thought I beat him again. I thought I beat him in the amateurs. I thought I beat him again. But when I got in the ring, they announced him as the next Jimmy Carruthers and all this sort of stuff. So I was sort of against it. But and back in those days, no judges, sole referee, pat you on the head at the end of the fight. And he got the decision, which I thought I won. And then the third fight, so that's 2 fights I've lost to. In the third fight, I'd beaten all the guys few guys that beat him. I was the Australian lightweight champion. I defended the title against him in a promotion I promoted, and for 1 minute, for 2 minutes and 58 seconds of round 1, I was well on top of him, and right on the belly, threw a left hand from his southpaw stance, turned the elbow, and it crashed me right. It was the first serious cut I had. It crashed me right between the eyes. The bell rang. I walked to the corner. Every judge gave me the round clearly. I walked to the corner, and my dad said, "Great round." I said, "My left eye's cut." He goes, "No, it's not." I said, "It's cut," and it just exploded. 24 stitches right to the bone. That was my first major cut. 24 stitches.
Wow.
And they called it a technical draw. So there we are again. And finally, I fought him about 6 months later, and for 14 rounds, I served it up to him pretty well. And at the end of round 14, my dad said to me, and I'll never forget it, and my dad's still alive at nearly 96. He's 95. He's 96 on October the 14th, thank God. And he said to me, "Listen, son," he goes, you've won this fight. There's no way they can rob you." He said, "But for God's sake, go out and stop him in the last round." And I did. And yeah, so I finally got my revenge over Jimmy, but we're great mates now, and he's a ripper bloke and was a top fighter. He fought everyone.
Now, you mentioned fighting all over the world, and you did fight some top guys. One was would go on to be a title challenger at 140 against Aaron Pryor, Lennox Blackmore, when you fought in Guyana. Now that was a tough guy.
Yeah.
And a bigger, I would assume maybe a little bit bigger guy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I won the world title at 130 and he fought Aaron Pryor at 140. I just fought in Wales and beaten the Welsh champion Billy Vivian on about 5 days' notice, but I damaged the ligaments in my right hand, tore the ligaments off, and my trainer Eddie Thomas, who's no longer with us, but a great Welsh champion, Eddie said to me, "Go home, Bar. It'll take 6 months for your hands." And I got offered this fight in Georgetown, Guyana, which was a $3,000 payday and an airfare back to Australia. So I said, "No, Eddie, I'm going to take this fight." And to Eddie's credit, he left his family. It was on Boxing Day, and to his credit, he left his family and came to Georgetown, Guyana with me. And look, I wasn't winning the fight, but I had 60 professional fights and I never took an 8 count. Blackmore was definitely way in front of me and I wasn't going to come back unless I knocked him out. But Eddie threw the towel in, I think it was the end of round 7. And oh, geez, I was so angry at him. I kicked the towel out the ring, abused him because he wasn't going to stop me, but Eddie stopped the fight. And I remember exactly what he said. He said, "You're a brave fool. You'll live to fight another day and you can be a world champion."
Now, a couple fights after that, you ended up meeting a guy that you would later meet again in your championship days, Najib Daho.
Yeah, well, that's another story too. I mean, I took the fight with Daho. I'd just come back from I'd had an eardrum grafted in because I had recurring busted eardrums. I think my left eardrum was busted, I think it was 8 or 9 times. I think it was 9 times. And I think my right eardrum was busted maybe 5. And I can't even remember which one it was now, but one of them wouldn't heal. I think it was my left eardrum. I had to go under surgery and have an eardrum grafted in. I took the fight in Wales. I had a fractured left hand. No, true story. I had Novocaine in my hand. And I lost an 8-round decision to Najib Daho in Wales. And look, I don't really think, look, it could have gone my way, but he was very sharp on the night, and I wasn't quite right, and he got the decision. But I fortunately got the revenge against him when he was the British champion, I was the world champion, and I defended the world title against him in Manchester, and won a clear decision over 12 rounds, where I nearly had him knocked out a couple of times. But poor Najib is no longer with us. He died in a car accident in Morocco quite a few years ago. But yeah, I finally got my revenge on Najib as well.
So, just backing up a little bit, we'll get to the title fight. You finally got your shot against, I guess it's safe to say, a local rival in Lester Ellis, who ironically was also born in the United Kingdom and then came down to Australia. How much kind of a rivalry was there between you and he? I mean, obviously you had been familiar with each other. You're both from Melbourne. Is that accurate to say?
Definitely accurate, Bob. What actually happened was, because I used to love to spar. I used to spar anyone, even heavyweights, whoever and wherever. And I used to go to different gyms, and I used to go to this gym in Sunshine, Glengala Avenue, and I sparred. I think it was the first time I went there, and I sparred about 6 or 7 different young blokes. And one of them was this kid, Lester Ellis. I was 22 and he was 12. And I got out the ring and I said, "What's this kid's name?" They said, "Lester Ellis." And I said, "This kid's going to be a world champion." And we became mates. I took him under my wing and I sparred him up until he was about 18. And then the rivalry, every time we sparred, he tried to kill me. He had the utmost killer instinct of any fighter. And he was a brilliant puncher and a brilliant mover, a great head evasion. And his father always led me to believe that when I retired, I would become his trainer and manager. But his elder brother, Keith, who's no longer with us, could see the potential of where Lester could go, and he basically watched everything that I taught him and every other trainer, and became Lester's trainer. And then the last 2 spars we had when Lester was about 18, I'd just come back from the Gold Coast, where I had a restaurant where I'd been, I'd blown up and I was out of shape, and I came back to Melbourne and we had a spar, and after 4 rounds he definitely got away with me, and after 4 rounds I said, "That's enough," and his brother Keith said, two more. I said, "No, that's enough." And the word got around Melbourne like wildfire that he got away with me in a gym spar, and I was pretty dirty on it because I'd nurtured him and brought him up, him and Graham Brooks, another fighter that I fought, a young Aboriginal fighter he went to 21-0 before I took the Commonwealth title off him, but that's another story. Anyway, So Lester and I didn't spar for a year or so. Then he won the world title, and I congratulated him. And I was as high as number 2 in the IBF world rankings as lightweight, but it looked like I was never going to get a shot. I was promised this and promised that. And one day I just said to my dad, I'm going to challenge Lester. And I hadn't fought at that weight in a decade, since I lost to Billy Moella over 15 rounds in Orange, New South Wales. And my dad said to me, son, I think you should give it away. And I said, why? He said, I think you've been hitting the head too much because you can't make that weight. I said, listen, I'll chop a leg off if I have to. But what I did, it was what I probably should have done earlier in my career. I went to a nutritionist, dietitian, and had my body fat weight under water, and they worked out that a body fat content of, I think, was around 6 or 7%, which is pretty good. Like a marathon runner, I could comfortably make the weight. And I went on, we challenged them, and the only reason they took the fight, I believe, was that my ex-trainer, Dana Goodson, had jumped ship when I collapsed in Miami training for a world title eliminator against Juan Arroyo. I tore the band of tissue completely off my heel, and Dana Goodson, who was a black American who I'd brought from Hawaii, I'd met there, a week after we got back to Melbourne, after breaking down and crying with my wife and my husband and making out, he was going to stick with me, we got back to Melbourne, and he's Lester's trainer. He saw me struggle to make 140 in Hawaii. I took a fight against Mike Anderson, I think it was, who was pretty good black American southpaw who cut me up pretty badly. I beat him unanimously, but Dana saw me struggle to make that weight, and he told the Ellis camp there was no way possible I'd make 130, and I think that's what convinced him to give me the shot. And 1 month before the fight, I weighed myself, made the 130 pound limit, sparred 15 rounds with top four very good sparring partners, and yeah, the rest sort of history now.
Yeah. So with you had 50 fights going into that match. He had 16, I think, something like that.
Yes.
So you had to feel confident, regardless of what had happened in that final spar where he, like you said, had his way with you.
I didn't finish either. We actually sparred once more for about a week or so. I lived like a athlete should, and we sparred again, and I actually served it up to him pretty badly, and they had to take him to hospital after the spar because he was passing blood. And they turned up at my parents' place and spoke to my parents, and I was out with my wife actually celebrating that I'd sort of turned the tide. But yeah, that was the last spar. So out of the last 2 spars, Lester definitely won one, but I won the last one. And people think, generally sparring, you're not meant to kill each other, but Lester just had this inherent killer instinct. He used to spar heavyweights and he used to smash everyone. He was a really big puncher and incredibly fast. I used to say to him, Lester, go easy on your sparring partners. You need them. People wouldn't spar him in the end.
Now, being that you were both Aussies and you were both from the same town practically, how big was that fight in Australia at the time?
No, it was massive at the time. It was massive. Festival Hall was sold out weeks before, and national television. And Lester was made a heavy favourite. And to be honest with you, the smart money, that got people that really knew boxing backed me. But I tell you what, and it was interesting because Ray Styles, Kid Lewis, who is no longer with us, God rest his soul, who was a great fighter. Ray, he trained with Lester quite a bit, and he kept saying to me before the fight, you've got to watch his right hand, you've got to watch his right hand. Now, I'd sparred him hundreds and hundreds of rounds, and he never ever really hurt me in a gym spar. I've got a pretty good chin. And the round one, the first punch he threw hit my elbow, slipped under my elbow into the side of my body and tore something. I felt it was like a knife stuck into me, the very first punch of the first round, but immediately I forgot that and got on with it. But round 3, and I thought I was, probably going well in the first 2 rounds, and I was telling him I was too strong and I was going to be there for 15 rounds. I was psyching him out, trying to anyway. But round 3, the great referee Gus Mercurio stepped between us and he pushed us apart, and he warned me for punching low, and I was sort of in shock because it certainly wouldn't have been deliberate. And then he said box on, and I was still sort of a bit stunned that I'd got warned, and Lester sidestepped, and he picked me up with an uppercut and crashed me with this right hand flush on the chin, and it was one of the biggest punches I'd ever taken in my career, and like my head went black, exploded, and I knew I was still on my feet because I had pins and needles in my toe, and he realised I was hurt, and he was, as I said, he was a killer, and he pushed me off and he bombarded me, and I just went to a smother and tried to grab him 3 times. He pushed me off and hammered away, and finally I got him. This was round 3, and I said, if that's the best you can do, you want to forget it, you know. And he said to me afterwards, he said, you're the only fighter I fought that could fight and talk for 15 rounds, and if I ever fight you again, I want to wear earplugs. But yeah, he hurt me badly. And round 12, he smashed me with the right hand, and they showed it in slow motion replay. It was the first 56th fight. It was the first time my nose was ever broken, and the commentators were Joe Bugner from the United Kingdom and Ron Casey, and Joe saw it. He said, I think Barry Michael's nose has been broken. His blood was just streaming down, and I was beyond the pain at that stage, but I knew my nose was broken. I get back to the corner, I sat down, and my trainer Ray Stiles said, great round, 3 rounds, you're champion of the world, because I was in front. And I said, he's broken the effing nose. And he said, forget it, 3 rounds, you're champion of the world. I said, but he's broken the effing nose. And I was looking for a bit of sympathy. He said, forget it, 3 rounds, you're champion of the world. So I went out and won the last 3 and won a unanimous decision.
Now, you made 3 defenses. Of course, we mentioned the last one was against Aho, and you mentioned earlier the word revenge. So was that in the, I mean, there was the revenge factor, but he also held a ranking, obviously, because of his status in the UK. So it was kind of it was a doable fight, acceptable for the IBF. But you had revenge on your mind in that fight?
Oh, definitely. I mean, Frank Warren promoted the fight, and I was actually sitting in the Rest Point Casino in Tasmania. I think I just had my second defence against Mark Fernandez, who I knocked out in 4 rounds. And the maitre d' came over and said, Mr. Michael, and I said, yes. He said, I've got a call from the United Kingdom for you. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, who is it? He said, it's Mr. Frank Warren. So he put Frank on the phone, and he offered me, you know, good money, the best money I'd ever made, and until the Lockridge fight. And next thing you know, I'm over in the UK, and I signed a contract with Frank for 2 years. So, you know, he promoted that fight in Manchester, and it was the last winning fight of my career.
Yeah. Now, so you went into the Lockridge fight, and talk a little bit about that fight, because you were 32 at the time. You had a good roll going. This was going to be your 4th defense. It was on, I'm sure, down in Australia, probably in the UK, but also on American television on NBC.
Yeah, it was like a big opportunity, and people don't know, but there's actually a movie being written, and there's going to be a movie about the rivalry between Lester and I, and basically my career. But what happened, and Lester was later managed by, let's say, some pretty some underworld figures were part of his team, not all of them. And they, when I beat Lester, they really had it in for me, because they lost a lot of money. They backed him extremely heavily. And about, I think it was under 4 months before I fought Rocky Lockridge, and I hadn't fought for 8 months at that stage, I was ambushed in a nightclub in Melbourne by a notorious gangster called Alphonse Gangitano, who, you know, ended up being shot and murdered a few years later. And him and probably half a dozen of his goons pinned me on a couch and smashed the living daylights out of me. He tried to bite my cheek off, and my nose was smashed really, really badly, right across my face. It was under my left eye. It was smashed so bad. And I had bite marks on my back and ring holes on my head where they were, you know, whacking me. And and then I had to have my nose re-broken and reconstructed. And the surgeon who did it, you know, because after so many years and punches, the polyp had thickened, but he thinned it out, and I had a new nose basically, but it didn't, every time I got hit in the gym, and it never ever bothered me previously, it hurt and it would bleed. And in the first round with Lockridge, and I take nothing from Rocky, God rest his soul, he passed away only a few months ago, great fighter. And I really was, after the beating in Lazars, it had taken the desire out of me, and I really didn't even consider not taking the fight, because he was the number 1 contender, and I had to fight him. I went to Norfolk, Virginia to get up and say why I hadn't, you know, had a defence, because Frank Moore anyway. And yeah, so I went into the fight with Lockridge, not really that aware of what a great fighter he was, and you know, probably not in the best shape of my life. And then I looked at his record after I lost him, and I think it was only 5 or 6 months before he'd lost a majority decision to the great Julio Cesar Chavez. So he was some fighter, Rocky. But look, I went 8 rounds with him, and it was only the second time in my career that, as I said, I never took an 8 count against anyone. But at the end of 8 rounds, my nose broke in the first minute of the first round. He hit me a little uppercut and it busted. And then round 2, my right eardrum went. But what's his name, Evander Holyfield, who was commentating at the end of 8 rounds, he said the fight was even. Well, a great fighter, Evander, but he's not a great judge, I tell you, because I knew I just was losing ground, and my left ear was full of blood. It was massive. And at the end of round 8, my dad said to me, "Enough, son, that's it." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And so we pulled the pin after my 60th professional fight, and lost my world title, and I announced my retirement in the ring on worldwide television. And Frank Warren tried to convince me to continue. He said, "You haven't fought for 12 months." And I had a bit of a go at him. I said, "Well, yeah, that's your fault," sort of thing. But, we've made amends. I've been speaking to his son quite a bit here, and I've said I want to make amends with Frank and put that in the past, because there was a bit of bad blood after the fight. But, it wasn't the way I wanted to finish my career, but I've never fought since.
So, how difficult of a transition was that? I know you said you had a restaurant going, so that you had other things you could do. Did you wrestle with the decision, and then, if not, did you wrestle afterwards with just life outside of the ring?
It was, and I can fully understand. I see fighters; they always make comebacks. I seriously considered it up till I was about 40. I was never ever offered a legitimate fight. I was offered a few shady deals, which I would never consider. And even as world champion, I was offered, my biggest offer was to lose in a European country for a substantial amount paid before the fight, which I won't go any further into that. But I'm going to definitely write this book one day. I've started it a couple of times, but there is a movie, as I said, being created around the story with Lester and I. But it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and for probably a year or so after I retired, I still every day ran and go to the gym, 3 or 4 nights a week, and still trained. And it was like I had to start another life, and I did. I got into real estate first of all, and then I got out of real estate and I got into insurance and finance. I had Barry Michael Financial Services on the Gold Coast, which went extremely well till we had the divorce we had to have and the recession we had to have at the same time. So that sort of mucked that up, and I finally moved back to Melbourne. I lived on the Gold Coast from 1987 to 92, and then I moved back to Melbourne and with custody of my first son, and I got into insurance down there for a while, and then I got a big jack of that because no one in Melbourne really knew me as an insurance or finance salesman. And then I got into amusement machines, and I had to build a pretty big amusement machine business, which was, pool tables, jukeboxes, pinball, shooting games, golf games, all that. And I did that for probably 13 or 14 years with some Greek partners in Melbourne who are some of the greatest people I've ever been in business with. And but I always would go back to promoting fights. So I started promoting fights when I was in my early 20s because I'd been ripped off a few times and didn't trust people. So boxing's always been my life and my dream, and I've always, even now at nearly 64, I'm 64 on the 2nd of June, I still get in the ring and spar with guys. I'm cautious because I call the shots basically because I don't really want to take punishment at my age, but I still do like to get in and have a bit of a move around occasionally, not as often as I used to, and it's all getting harder at 64.
Sure.
But yeah, boxing's always been my life, and look, I've just in the last month or so, probably 2 months ago now, I've been approached by a Chinese group that I work in real estate with in Melbourne to start promoting regularly in China. It looks as though I'm going to be able to get Tim Zhu, young Kostya Zhu's son, Timmy Zhu, who just won the Australian title, hopefully to fight a Chinese opponent in Beijing in September. I spoke to Main Event Australia today, Foxtel Main Event, and it looks very promising as it might happen because I think China is one of the world's emerging markets in boxing, and it's going to be huge.
So even though you did the real estate and the insurance and stuff like that, you didn't walk completely cleanly away from boxing. It was always in your blood.
I never could. I'm here. It's a great honour to be here, and the IBF have brought me over for this convention, and my beautiful wife Sue's with me, and you know, great to be here with all the Australian contingent of world champions and some of the other world great fighters, including Inoue the Monster, who I've been watching him, and he's something else. It was a pleasure to have photos taken with him last night. But yeah, no, boxing's always been my life, and you know, I'm still involved in real estate. I'm involved in a few other bits and pieces. I'm involved with a company called iBoomerang, which is something I'm going to introduce to the IBF, which is a multi-level travel business which you can create a lot of residual income out of and save a lot of money travelling. Anyone wants to know about iBoomerang, go to boxer.boomerang, BWMERANG. It's wboomerang.com, boxer.boomerang.com, and that's my site. Join from there. Boxer.boomerang. Boxer.iboomerang, BW, it's a W.
Okay.
And it's an American company, and can you believe it's called Boomerang, because boomerangs, of course, come from the Aboriginals.
That's right. That's right. Well, Barry, it sounds like you're, leading a full life, and we're glad you're still involved in boxing. That's for sure.
Thanks, Bob. You know, I'll be involved in boxing to the day I die. And look, there's so many great people in boxing. You know, you meet people from all walks of life in boxing, and the life that I've had through boxing has been incredible.
Well, thank you again. It's been a privilege meeting with you and having you on the series here, and we look forward to seeing you again, maybe next year's convention in California.
I definitely will be there. I will never miss another IBF convention, and I just am so thankful to the way that Daryl Peoples and Annabelle Miramontes and all the whole IBF team have treated my wife and I. Thank you so much.
All right. And any last words you want to say to the people that do remember Barry Michaels and wondered where is he now?
Yeah, just I'm still here, gang, and enjoying life to the fullest. And I'm 64 on the 2nd, and I still think there's plenty left in me.
All right. Thank you, Barry. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.